All right, part 6 of example 5a, a cash budget by month and for the quarter. What we've done so far is we've budgeted for our major source of cash inflows, which is our cash collections from customers, and we've budgeted 2 of our major sources of cash outflows, the cash disbursements for merchandise purchases and the cash disbursements for operating expenses. And we've done that 2 different ways. What a cash budget does is it combines all of our inflows and outflows and puts them together in a way that creates an ending balance in cash. So it helps us predict how much cash we'll have on hand, helps us predict and avoid running out of cash, and helps us be able to create our ending balance sheet to know how much cash we're going to have there. So all those things are what a cash budget does. Now in this example, we're doing a cash budget monthly. I think in real life, monthly is way too infrequently. I think you probably need to budget your cash weekly, if not every few days or even every day. It kind of depends on how much cash inflow and outflow you have in your business, but monthly is I think way too coarse. It's not fine enough. It's not detailed enough. You could easily have cash, a proper cash budget that shows you're not going to run out of cash on April 30th. But 3 weeks into the month, if the cash you expect to come in April still hasn't come in yet, even if it would come in next month or next week and still be in April, I think you could still run out of cash in that month. So we do need to be careful that this example that we're doing in class is an example to show the mechanics of budgeting, not always ideal practices. So I'd recommend budgeting cash, like I say, weekly or even daily. But let's take a look at a cash budget overall and see how the mechanics of a cash budget work. What we're going to do with cash is we're going to start with our beginning balance. Cash is a balance sheet item. It's something that we have on hand, and so it's going to increase and decrease over time, but we need to worry about how much we have on hand. At the beginning of April, how much cash do we have on hand? Well, we can look at our March 31st balance sheet, and we can see that we plan to have on hand on April 1st $219,550. How do we know that? That's our March 31st ending cash, and what we end March with is what we begin April with. What we can do with that is we can add the cash we expect to collect during the period, and here we're going to look back up to what we did earlier in our budget, and we can say in April we expect to collect $672,700, and we'll add that to our cash collections, and that'll give us our total cash available, and that's going to be the sum of these two. So we've got $892,250 available to spend during the month of April. Now again, this is not realistic in the sense that it's not like all $672,000 are going to show up on April 1st. That $672 is going to be spread out throughout the month. So we're never going to have a pile of $900,000 of cash on hand, but over the course of the month we're going to have this many dollars available to us. So we have to be careful not to make this into something that it kind of isn't. All right, now what are we going to do with our cash? We're going to spend it on the things that we need to run our organization. So what are our disbursements going to be for? They're going to be for merchandise purchases. They're going to be for operating expenses. What else are we told that we're going to spend cash on? We've got equipment purchases for cash, and we've got dividends in the first month of, I'm sorry, that's an error, I should say the first month of each quarter. So in some months we're going to have dividends, in some months we're going to have equipment purchases. We're going to have to deal with these things because these are cash expenses or cash disbursements as well. So what are our cash disbursements for merchandise purchases? Well, we've already figured that out. So we can look at our cash disbursements for merchandise purchases. In the month of April, we're going to spend $491,000 in cash. Again, don't pick up your cost of goods sold. Don't pick up the amount of purchases, but pick up the cash disbursements for merchandise purchases. That's the right number to pick up. For operating expenses, we've got our 2 different options here. We can pick either one. They give us the same number. We want our cash disbursements for operating expenses. We want the number that does not include depreciation. So if we take option A, we want the number before we add depreciation in to begin with. If we take option B, we want the number after we subtract it back out. Either way, we end up in the same place. So I'll just pick this one from option A. Equipment purchases. What are we told about equipment purchases? We're told equipment purchases in the month of April are going to be 0. In dividends, we're told that our dividends during the month of April will be $12,000. So what are our total disbursements? So our disbursements during the month of April are going to be $856,950. We've got cash of $892,250. We're going to spend $856,950. So we should be okay, unless we have a minimum cash balance policy, which a lot of companies do. It's not sufficient to simply not run out of cash, but many companies would prefer to have a minimum balance on hand. And so what we need to do is take the cash that we're going to end the month of April with and make sure that it's high enough for our cash needs. So this line item is sort of a temporary subtotal. I often see it called something like excess or deficiency of cash on hand. And in a sense, we have an excess because we will have $35,000. We're not going to completely run out of cash. However, we have a minimum balance requirement according to company policy of $60,000. And given the terms that we have with the bank, we need to borrow in increments of $1,000. The bank doesn't want us borrowing, $1 at a time. It costs them something to issue the loan to us, and so they want to make sure that we're borrowing enough that the interest that they're going to earn is worth it. So what we need to do is figure out how much we need to borrow to figure out what we're going to do about the fact that we don't have quite enough. And so there are a few ways to go about doing this. To make life simple, what I'm simply going to do is I'll get an estimate number and then I'll fix it. So how much would we need to borrow? We would need to borrow $24,700 to bring our balance up to the minimum of $60,000. However, since we have to borrow in increments of $1,000, I'll simply put in the $25,000. There are some ways you can do rounding formulas, and you can round to the nearest thousand and things like that, or round up to the nearest thousand. You can do those if you like, but more important is to get the right number in there. We also have to worry about any repayments that we might have to make. Now, in the example that we're given, we're told we're only going to make a repayment at the end of the quarter, and we would repay interest at the end of the quarter. Again, the terms that we have in here are not terribly realistic, but they're there to make the budget, make the budgeting the point instead of the financing details the point. So what do we have for our financing activity? We have a total increase in cash from our financing activity of $25,000. And so our ending balance for April is going to be the excess or deficiency plus the financing activity. And so we're going to end the month of April with $60,300. So that's our ending balance for April. In the next video, I will complete the rest of the cash budget.